What if I told you the darts we throw today, the sleek, all-metal precision kind, didn't even exist until one man came along and reinvented the entire game? His invention would spark a revolution, shape the way darts are played worldwide, and yet, most people have no idea who he was. Frank Lowy's story doesn't begin with darts. It begins in Budapest in 1901, where he was born into a world that offered him very little. His family had limited means, and from an early age, he learned that survival depended on discipline, skill, and a willingness to adapt. That mindset led him to engineering, where he trained as an apprentice and developed a sharp eye for design and mechanics. Those skills would later prove invaluable, though at the time he had no idea his future lay in reinventing a game played mostly in smoky pubs. By 1929, Lowy's ambition had outgrown his hometown. He left Hungary behind and made the leap to England, a move that would change the course of his life. There, he found steady work tied to technical fields, patent translation, drafting, and engineering projects that demanded both precision and creativity. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't famous, but he was steadily building a foundation of skills that allowed him to look at everyday objects differently. Where others saw routine, he saw potential. That mindset surfaced one unassuming evening on a holiday trip to Devon. Lowy walked into a traditional British pub, the kind where darts was just a casual distraction, a way for working men to unwind with a pint in hand. The darts themselves were rough, almost crude by modern standards, wooden bodies, turkey feather flights, heavy tips that weren't designed for balance so much as survival. To the average player, this was normal, but Lowy couldn't help noticing the flaws. The darts wobbled, flights bent too easily, and the designs felt centuries behind what they could be. Most people would have laughed it off, thrown a few rounds, and gone back to their drinks. But Lowy wasn't most people. He was an engineer. To him, every flaw was also an opportunity. Every dart that bounced wrong or flew off target whispered a challenge. What if this game could be better? What if the dart itself could be reinvented? That thought refused to leave him. It followed him long after he left the pub, tugging at his imagination. Darts wasn't just a pastime anymore, it had become a puzzle, and Lowy was determined to solve it. But this was no casual hobby. Before Frank Lowy entered the picture, darts looked very different from what we know today. Walk into any pub in the early 1930 seconds, and you'd likely find French darts, chunky wooden bodies tipped with steel and finished with real turkey feathers for flights. They weren't sleek, they weren't aerodynamic, and balance was often more luck than design. Another common version used brass barrels with wooden shafts jammed into them. They worked, sure, but they weren't precise. And for someone like Lowy, they were crying out for reinvention. He didn't just want to tinker with the design, he wanted to transform it. His idea was bold. What if the dart could be made entirely from metal? Strong, consistent, aerodynamic, something that wouldn't snap or warp after a few games. After months of sketching, testing, and refining, he created a radical new version, a streamlined all-metal dart with one key exception, the flight. Instead of feathers that bent out of shape, Lowy designed a screw-on cap at the back of the dart that would hold the flight firmly in place. This same cap had another hidden advantage. It acted like armor, deflecting stray darts and protecting the back of the barrel from being destroyed in crowded dartboards. The final product gleamed with chromium plating, sleek and futuristic compared to the clunky darts of the past. It didn't just fly better, it looked better. To market it, Lowy came up with a name that matched its speed and shine, the Silver Comet. The branding was clever, dramatic, and instantly memorable, but even here, there were challenges. He soon discovered Silver Comet had already been trademarked elsewhere, forcing him to navigate around the legal red tape before he could sell his creation. In 1937, he filed for a patent to protect his design. On November 4th, his application went in, and by May 3rd, 1938, it was officially granted. Patent number GB 484292 cemented Lowy's claim as the man who reinvented the dart. With the legal paperwork in hand and a product unlike anything else on the market, he was ready to launch. But invention alone wasn't enough. Manufacturing, distribution, and branding would become his next great battle. But designing it was just step one. Lowy was an engineer, not a factory owner. He had the vision, but he didn't have the facilities to mass produce his Silver Comet, so he pieced the process together himself. He contracted one company to machine the metal barrels, another to produce the flights, and others to handle plating and finishing. Parts were shipped across suppliers, eventually making their way back to Loewy's London office, where they were assembled into final sets. It was a complicated, almost fragile system, but it worked. To get the darts into players' hands, he struck a deal with John Wisden & Co., a respected name in British sport. Through them, the Silver Comet reached pubs and shops across the country. Loewy even pioneered a now standard practice, selling darts in boxed sets of 3. At the time, most players bought them individually, but Loewy understood that darts weren't just casual pub toys anymore, they were sports equipment. Presenting them as a complete, professional set gave the Silver Comet an edge. For a while, it seemed unstoppable. The Silver Comet gained attention for its futuristic look and improved performance. But then, disaster struck. In 1938, just as momentum was building, John Wisden & Co. went bankrupt. Overnight, Loewy lost his main distribution channel and faced the terrifying possibility that his invention might vanish before it truly took off. But instead of folding, he adapted. He began selling the darts under his own name, and soon after, he introduced a new brand that would define the rest of his career: Unicorn. Inspired by the royal coat of arms, he chose the unicorn as a symbol of strength, rarity, and prestige. It was bold branding, mystical yet authoritative, and it worked. From that point on, the unicorn name became inseparable from the Silver Comet, and eventually from darts as a whole. What had begun as a fragile, improvised operation was slowly turning into something far bigger, the foundation of a sporting empire. Even so, this was just the beginning of his impact. The Silver Comet wasn't just a product, it was a turning point. Up until Loewy's design, darts had no real standard. Every pub, every maker, every player had their own version, with huge differences in weight, size, and construction. One set of darts might feel like throwing miniature spears, while another might wobble like paper airplanes. That chaos was part of the charm, but it also held the game back. Loewy's innovation introduced something new: consistency. His all-metal barrel meant every dart was the same weight, the same length, and balanced in the same way. For the first time, players could actually practice with reliable equipment and expect similar results game after game. It sounds obvious now, but in the 1930 seconds, it was revolutionary. And he didn't stop there. Loewy experimented with new materials, becoming one of the first to introduce plastic flights as an alternative to fragile feathers. These flights lasted longer, stayed straighter, and offered yet another step toward precision. His mindset was clear: darts shouldn't be a pub toy that broke after a night of heavy use, it should be durable sports equipment. This pursuit of standardization shaped the entire industry. Once Unicorn established its reputation, rival manufacturers had no choice but to follow. Darts slowly moved from being a messy, makeshift pastime into a game with expectations of quality and reliability. Even as other makers entered the field, Loewy's influence was everywhere, embedded in the design choices that became the blueprint for modern darts. But the real transformation was still ahead. Because while Loewy created the equipment that changed the game itself was about to explode onto a much bigger stage. By the 1970 seconds, darts was no longer just a pub distraction, it was creeping into living rooms across Britain. Television networks saw something magnetic in the game: the tension of the throw, the precision of the hit, and the drama of players battling it out with pint glasses on the table beside them. For the first time, millions of people could watch darts from their own homes. That visibility pushed the sport to evolve. With cameras rolling and audiences growing, the days of casual, anything-goes darts were over. Broadcasters needed rules, structure, and uniformity. Enter the British Darts Organisation, BDO, founded in 1973. The BDO stepped in to standardize not just the darts, but the very way the game was played. They locked in the official board height at 5 feet 8 inches, fixed the throwing distance at 2.37 meters, and enforced consistency in competitions across the country. This was the moment darts shed its purely pub game image. Players became professionals, tournaments became national events, and sponsors started to pay attention. Yet with growth came friction. By the late 1980 seconds and early 1990 seconds, tensions between top players and the BDO's strict control began to boil over. Some players felt underpaid, others frustrated at the lack of global ambition. That frustration exploded in 1992 when a breakaway group of professionals formed their own organization, the World Darts Council, later renamed the Professional Darts Corporation, PDC. The split was messy and controversial, with bitter disputes over player rights, tournament legitimacy, and who truly represented the sport. But in the long run, the rivalry pushed darts even further into the mainstream. Prize money increased, tournaments multiplied, and the sport gained international attention. And through it all, the fingerprints of Loewy's original innovations never disappeared. The standardized dart, once a radical idea, had now become the foundation of a professional, televised sport. So where does Loewy's legacy end up? Frank Lowy didn't just create a better dart, he built an empire. His company, Unicorn Products, grew into the most dominant darts manufacturer in the world. For decades, Unicorn supplied professionals, pubs, and leagues with equipment that carried the stamp of reliability. Their darts became the benchmark, and their name became almost synonymous with the sport itself. Even today, Unicorn is still a global leader, outfitting champions and amateurs alike. But Loewy's story isn't without mysteries and controversies. For one, there's the question of credit. While Loewy was undoubtedly the pioneer behind the Silver Comet, some argue that others in the industry also pushed darts forward with their own innovations. Did he single-handedly reinvent darts, or was he simply the first to bring a professional polish to changes already bubbling under the surface? That debate lingers among historians of the sport. There were also competitive tensions. Once Unicorn gained traction, rival manufacturers tried to challenge their dominance, leading to disputes over patents, branding, and marketing tactics. In an industry where margins were tight and pubs were the battleground, these rivalries could be fierce, though much of it remains underreported. Perhaps the biggest unknown is whether Loewy himself foresaw how far darts would go. Did he imagine it would become a televised global spectacle, or did he simply want to solve a problem he saw in a Devon pub decades earlier? The truth may never be clear. What is clear though, is that every dart player today, whether in a world championship or a quiet corner of a bar, owes part of their game to Loewy's original spark of invention. And yet, his story leaves us wondering, how different would darts look if he hadn't stepped into that pub in the 1,930 seconds? Frank Loewy's life reads like an unlikely legend. From a poor upbringing in Budapest to an engineering mind in London, to the man who held a dart in his hand and saw not a game, but a problem waiting to be solved. His Silver Comet didn't just fly straighter, it carried darts into the modern age. It forced consistency. Where chaos reigned, it elevated a pastime into a sport, and it laid the groundwork for the professional stage that would come decades later. Today, when we see darts thrown under bright lights, in front of thousands of fans, broadcast to millions at home, it's easy to forget that all of it rests on one man's obsession with making the dart itself better. Every standard set, every flight improved, every perfectly weighted barrel owes something to Loewy's vision. So next time you step up to a dartboard, pause for a second, feel the weight in your hand. Notice the smooth balance, the reliable flight, the precision of the throw. That isn't an accident, it's the echo of a man who refused to accept good enough. And maybe that's the real legacy of Frank Loewy, the reminder that sometimes, even the simplest games can be transformed forever, when someone dares to ask what if this could be better.